close those doors in a minute.
Can we shut those doors?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for coming back in, whether it's into your room online or here in Unity Hall. This program is so important. Over the years, All Souls has in various ways paid attention to racial justice, obviously with our Black Lives Matter banner vigils and standing outside, the white supremacy teach-in that we did years ago, the UU Common Reads that have focused on racial justice various years. The Grace Committee has brought us different guests, and we've, of course, had different actions. But since the pandemic that really sort of derailed a lot of actions and programs we were doing, there needed to be a restart of our racial justice focus. And new member Rich Carter, as we got to know him and he had conversations with us, we found out that he had done these programs in the past and facilitated groups to look at racial bias and what it means for racial justice today. And Rich also mentioned that he knew this amazing woman who had replicated the doll studies that were done in, let's see now, 70 years ago originally now, something like that. And what it showed in modern times and in times when DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, right, is being attacked and dismantled and getting a bad name in various circles in our leadership, especially when we know that those programs were, and that lens is there for a reason and is actually vital to who we are as a society and reaching those ideals that we purport to have. So today's program really brings that attention back and says, what is this all about? And how does it apply to us today? So I'm so glad that we can do this together. And there'll be a follow-up with this 3 sessions with Rich facilitating on our own bias and racial justice, which is going to be really interesting. And that's going to be in May on Tuesday evenings starting the first Tuesday in May. So look for that information. And now I'd like Rich to come up, and he's going to help us introduce Valencia.
It's a small group, so I think my voice will project enough.
Please stand in line, people. We need the microphone.
Oh, we do, okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Perry, and thank you for all that you have done to make this happen today as well. And thanks to all of you for being here and being a part of our first of that 4-part series that Perry mentioned. It's my pleasure today to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Valencia Bagby-Young, who has a special presentation for us. And I've known Val for probably about 20 years, having met her through my partner, Steve. They were longtime co-workers at the Connecticut Department of Developmental Services, responsible for the care and health of hundreds of adults with developmental disabilities. And when I first met Val, she was working on her doctorate in educational psychology, and it wasn't long before she became Dr. Val. I was going to tell you a little bit about her background and training, but then I looked up on the screen and I said, just read all the initials that are up there after her name. Some people have Junior. Val has a lot more than that. Val also has 2 master's degrees in psychology and in science and nursing. She is a licensed psychologist and board-certified family nurse practitioner, and also has a postmaster's certification in psychiatric mental health. We're fortunate to have Dr. Val share her insights about what she learned doing her research for her doctoral dissertation on the racial identities of young Black and biracial children. And Val is accompanied by her daughter Amaya this morning, so please join me in giving both of them a welcome to All Souls, and as we say, where all souls are welcome. Welcome. All right, 'cause I think we're gonna have a
Thank you. I am so glad. It's such an honor to be here. You know, I am told there are many kinds of deaths, and the worst kind is to be bored to death. So I promise you that I will not bore you to death. The Dow study came about, and Jesse, if you could go to the next slide. When my daughter, I was like in my late 20s when I went to Central, and I was already a registered nurse. I was a registered nurse when I was 21, but I went to a nursing program, so I had an RN diploma, and I wanted a bachelor's degree, but in Connecticut at that time, you couldn't do it without doing clinicals, and by then I was married, and I had started a family, and I needed to work, so I couldn't do it, so I went into psychology. It was the best thing that could have happened. I came across this Dow study that was done in the 1940s, and I'm standing over to the side so I can see the screen and move. But I came across this study, and at the time I had 3 daughters, and then I just had my last daughter, Amaya. So there's 15 years between Amaya, the youngest, and our oldest. Same husband, we just did things differently. And so I came across this study that psychologist doctors Kenneth and Mamie Clark, who are husband and wives, they did this study in the 1930s and 40s on black children. The study had been done on white children, and white children favored the white dolls, and that was considered normal. But then when black children favored the white dolls, it said something about the way they feel about themselves. And it was done during segregation and racism. And so their study was used as a part of desegregation. So when I came across it, it was wonderful. And then when I got into the doctorate program, I thought, I went into my doctorate because when I was at Central, I had a bachelor's in psychology, and I wanted to go back to school, and I thought about social work. But one of my professors, and she was a white woman, I said, I want to do something different now. I want to go and get my master's. And I said, I might do social work. And she said, no. She said, don't do social work because it's becoming heavily populated with people of color. Go into psychology, get your doctorate in psychology because there are very few black psychologists. And you don't need a master's degree to get into the doctorate program, which I didn't know. And when I got into the doctor's program, after you get so many credits, I got a master's, but they don't really give you a master's degree. But I got one because I did not know that you don't really get one. So I kept saying, I want my degree. And so they took me out of the doctor program, put me in the master's program, gave me my degree, and then put me back in it. And then after that, I realized, so that was okay, it worked for me anyhow. So that's how I came about doing the study. If you can go to the next slide. So in the original study, they only used dolls, and it was black and white dolls. And they felt that children identified themselves based on their choices. And it wasn't about the dolls, it was about how they see themselves in society. And my thought was that in 2007, that's when I did the study, I believe that we had not changed, that there is perceived progress, but we really hadn't changed. And I could say that because I had 4 daughters. And the youngest one, when she was 3, they all had black dolls. When I was growing up, they didn't have black dolls. My first black doll I got when I was 12, and she was a baby alive. And my parents thought I was too big to play with dolls, but I still got it, and I played with it. But so they always had black dolls. But when my youngest, Amaya, when she was 3, friends gave her a doll, and it was a white doll. And she carried this doll everywhere. And people would, like, if you go somewhere and there's all black people, and your black daughter's holding a white doll, they're looking at you like, what's the problem here? And so I thought, well, it must be because she doesn't have a white doll, so this white doll looks cute. So and then I thought it can't just be that. And so that's what made me focus on the studies. Oh, you can go to the next slide. So there were some assumptions, and I said, like, children are the lens through which we view progress. If you want to know whether there is actual or perceived progress, you need to look at children, interact with children, and talk to them. And I wanted to know, what are the racial attitudes of preschool children? The original studies used children's ages 3 to 7. I did 3 to 5 because I was trying to catch them before they went to kindergarten and got influenced by the things that they learned in elementary school and from peers. So I did 3 to 5. And then what attributes and influences their attitudes, and what is perceived progress when we look at it, and how does that translate into what is really going on, and how people feel about how children feel about their own race, because these children grow up and they hold on to those same attitudes and beliefs unless something happens that causes them to change what they're thinking. So that was, I was looking at how these things shape children and how they view themselves in the larger world. Next slide. And this is just like some of the Dow studies. So the first Dow study that I did, and I'll show you pictures of the Dows, I tried to get Dows that look good, but the first set of studies, they look at how the children, what does that say? The first one. Let me see. Oh, so the first set of questions were just looking at what the children thought. Some of them looked at whether they knew the difference between black and white, so their racial awareness. And then the last one was, the last question had to do with how they self-identified. I changed some of the questions because in the original questions, they used the word Negro and colored, and I just changed them to black and white, because that was simple and people understood what that meant regardless of how they identified. And then you can go to the next slide. And the next slide. So, and I also looked at something that the original studies didn't do. I incorporated 2 different things. I added something that's called a preschool racial attitude measure, and I'll talk about that, but it has pictures or drawings of people. So I had the Dows, the preschool racial attitude measure, or the PRAM, and I modified it. And then I had a questionnaire for parents. And then I did all of the studies myself. So I met with the families, I interviewed the children, did the little Dows and the pictures with the children. But I also listed what their skin color, and it was based on a chart like this. So the bottom being light, somewhere in the middle being medium, and the top 2 being dark. And so I rated what the color, the skin complexion, so that was my bias, so I determined that, and I just made a note of it. There were 51 children and their parents so in the study altogether. So for each child, I had one parent, sometimes more than one parent wanted to do the questionnaire, but I only included the one parent who was originally part of the study. And the parents had to identify as black. I don't care where they originated or whatever else, but they had to be black. They could be mixed race as long as they self-identified and their child identified as black. That was the criteria, and in the age range 3 to 5. And when I was looking back over all the research and preparation for this, there were so many children that were excluded because they weren't quite 3 yet, or they were 6. So, but it was just interesting. Next slide. These were the Dows that I use. On the first set to the right are the Bitty Babies. Those are American Girls dolls. Cost me $100 each. I did write to the company. I told them what I was doing, and I asked them to donate. They said no. Okay, so I had to buy them. And then the other set are Lots of Love dolls. Came from Walmart, cost me $10 each. The first 5 children in the study, they only had the Bitty Babies. But the problem with them is that they don't sit up. And the children would get so focused on the babies not sitting. So, and then the original question was, give me the doll. After those first 5, I changed it to point to the doll. Because when I said give me, it could influence their next choice on the question. So if you're holding on to this white doll, and then I ask, a question like, which one looks like you or something, if they tend to identify, they could identify with the one they're holding. So I wanted to remove all of that. So I added the Lots of Love dolls, and they could sit. So they were fine. So for the most part, in this study, when the question was like, show me the doll that looks nice, white doll. The majority of them picked the white doll. Now, mind you, these are all black children. Show me the doll that you like to play with. White doll. Show me the doll that you like the best. And then it was, you got down, oh, show me the doll that is white. Show me the one that is black. For the most part, you know, probably 50-50, they could identify black and white. And then the last question was, show me the doll that looks like you. Even when the child was dark complexion, they still picked the white doll as looking like them. Now, it makes sense, because if you said the white doll is nice, the white doll is the one I want to play with, which one like, well, the white doll must look like me because, you know, I'm nice. And when I was pulling out these dolls, I had them in my closet. So I'm in the closet taking the dolls out, and I have a granddaughter who is Noni. She had just turned 5 in February. She walks into my closet and she sees the dolls and she goes, oh, can I play with your dolls? And I said, yes, sure. So and I'm watching her to see which one she picks up, because all 4 of them are laying right there. She goes for the white doll. And she goes for the white, lots of love doll. And I didn't ask her why she picked it or anything, because it doesn't matter. What matters is that she chose the white one. So she goes downstairs, and then I'm still in the closet getting out my books and things, and she comes back up, and I go, oh, what do you need? And she goes, oh, I need this other doll. And so she picks the black one. And I'm thinking, like, did she change her mind? And I said, oh, how come? And she goes, oh, Pop wants it. Okay, so now I gotta go downstairs and find out why my 63-year-old husband wants a black doll. So I get down there, and he's holding the black baby, and she's there with her white doll. And I said, Noni said you wanted the black doll? And he goes, yeah. And Noni says he doesn't like the white doll. And he immediately said, no, that's not what I said. But that's what she heard. What she saw was she had the white doll. He said, give me the black doll. And so in her mind, he must not like the white doll. Well, isn't that awful? So I said to my husband, I said, look, it's not about the dolls. It's how she sees herself. And by you like rejecting that white doll, the one that she chose, do you think she's not going to reject? She's going to hold on to this poor white doll that you don't like. But it's not about the dolls. And so it was just, as I said, so now we got like a 60-year-old man holding a baby. Okay. So it just like, and I was thinking like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like you fell into that trap. It's not about the dolls. The dolls are just a symbol of the bigger picture. So next slide. And then it was I just talked about the results that overall the children preferred the white dolls. It happened in the 1930s and 40s, and it happened in 2007, and it happened in my house in 2025. And it goes beyond the dolls. There were many reasons why, they chose the dolls. Like some people would say that the dolls from the 1930s and 40s were not attractive, and they weren't. But we've changed that. And there was another study that used, they added a third doll, and it was a mulatto. They called it mulatto, but it was a biracial doll. And still, the children chose the white doll. So next slide. And then it is just understanding the results of that doll study. But the most important thing for you to understand is it is not about the dolls. It is about the way children view themselves and other people that look like them. Next slide. And then I added this thing that I wanted to, because I believe that as parents, we influence the way that our children perceive themselves. And so I had a questionnaire that parents filled out. And one parent, and they filled it out, and it would ask like, what professional is your child exposed to that is a person of color? Number one, do you know what the number one profession is that children are exposed to somebody of color? Preachers, ministers, pastors, across the board, that was number one. Then teachers were not up there, but daycare providers were. And so a lot of them were in nursery schools. And so, it was interesting. And then the other question was, when you have to find somebody, like if you're looking for a professional, like a pediatrician, do you look for a person of color? Now, mind you, these are all black parents answering these questions. No. Some say, I never even thought about it. There were a few that did, and they couldn't find a black pediatrician, or the black pediatrician was affiliated with a clinic and they wanted to go to a private pediatrician. So there were some, but for the most part, they were like, no. And then when, there was one parent, we talked about a lawyer, like if you need a lawyer, no. I'm not going with the black, I'm going, and even though Jewish is not a racial thing, Jewish, they would say Jewish. So these are their perceptions. And if you feel that way, and your son or daughter is gonna grow up to be what? And it was like engineer, doctor, lawyer, teacher, professor, astronaut, president. But if you feel that you won't even look for somebody that looks like you to hire, who do you think is gonna hire your child? So it was just, a bigger, broader picture. And the parents who were pro-black, meaning that they were gonna find a black pediatrician, black this, everything was black. Their children were pro-white to the max. And it was just like, there was one mom, and she was just funny because I had to have her sit behind her son because I didn't want the parents in the room, but they could because I get it, they wanted to see. And the way I did the study, I had to go to people's homes to do it. I thought, well, I'm gonna go to black churches and advertise, and I went to 3 black churches out of, must have been like 20 that I reached out to. I could not get past the person answering the phone. And at one church in Hartford, the church, they had a nursery school, a preschool, and most of the children there were black. So when I'm talking to this person on the phone, I tell her what I'm doing. She goes, no, we're not interested. I said, what do you mean? Like, can you bring it to the pastor? No, we don't have those. I'm like, you don't have what, black children? So I couldn't get past. So my thought was that in the beginning, I would go to these churches and I would actually do the studies in the churches. Didn't work out like that because I couldn't even get in the door of the church. And the pastor of my church did reach out to people, and his wife was the one who did illustrations in the pictures that I'll show you later because she's an artist. But that was like shocking for me that I couldn't even get in the door of black churches. Okay. So what I would do was my baby's in a cart, a sewing cart full of dolls, and I would go drive to their homes, make appointments, and when I got there, I would be doing the study, and before I'm done, this parent is on the phone calling somebody else saying, you are not gonna believe this. That's how I got my 51 children, because those parents were in shock. They called other parents. And this mother was, sitting behind her son, and when he picks the white doll, she coughs. And I'm like, oh my, but he didn't get it, I got it. Then when he picks the white doll for something else good, she's like, so I say, no noise, please. Her son didn't get it, but I knew exactly what she was doing. And then one of the questions was, what television show does your child watch that stars a black person? Well, at that time, there were only 2 that people could think of. One of them was Penny Proud, the cartoon, and That's So Raven. And most of them were not watching Penny Proud or That's So Raven because they were a little bit above their ages. So there wasn't one. And so when your children only see, like in books, in cartoons, TVs, if they see people that do not look like them, why would they embrace what they look like when they don't see anything that seems good that looks like them? So that was another part of it. So I just, the parents and the questionnaire that they did. And there were 2 parents who were illiterate, and I was disappointed in myself for not picking it up sooner. I had a consent form, and for the first one, I gave her the form, and I said, you can read through that and sign it, and then I'll start. And I didn't start, and I'm waiting, and then all of a sudden, it's like this light bulb went off, and I was like, she can't read it. So then I said, let me read this to you because it might go a little bit faster. So I read through the consent, made sure she agreed with it, and then I said, and you can sign right there, and I put like a little X where she could sign. But I was so disappointed in myself for like, I should have picked up on that right away, but I got it. So with the second one, I knew, and it was good. But these parents were just, for them to be willing to let me come into their homes and to do this and then have this conversation. And I did have a list of therapists for children that if they thought, somehow their child was damaged, which I don't know how that could have happened, but I did have a list of resources. But I think for the parents, they were thinking like, I've been doing all of these things to make my child, and whatever I'm doing is not right. And one parent, they had twin daughters that, they really were not in the study. They were a little bit older. They were 5, but I wanted their brothers because they had twin daughters, and then they had adopted 2 boys, and the boys were 4. They were not brothers biologically, but they were around the same age. So the boys were in my study, but the mom was like, and they favored the white dolls and the white people in the pram. So the mom said, no, you can't go. You gotta do my daughters. I don't care whether they're old enough for the study or they're too old. So we did it, and they did the same thing. And her thought was, well, these are my biological daughters. And I said, it is not about that. It is about them and finding their place in the world. And she was just like, and it was her husband who ran into me at a store, and he said, hey, I heard that you're doing this study. You call my wife and go to my house. And so that's how I did it. But it was just eye-opening for me and for the parents. And then afterwards, I went back to a couple of the churches and talked about the results and what it means. Next slide. And next slide. Okay, so the pictures, these are, the pictures on the right were the ones that were modified. So I purchased the preschool racial attitude measure, but the pictures on the left are the ones that were in the original study. So I just had an artist redo the pictures so they looked a little better and more, like they should, so that they were more appealing. And it was my pastor's wife who was the one who did this. And some of them, I think 4 questions have to do with gender, and the other ones had to do with race. Gender and male and female roles. So next slide. And this one had to do with the boys, and is that the nice? Kind, had to do with kind, like kick the dog, or mean. So I asked the question, and then they had to pick either the black boy or the white boy. And so that what they thought, the majority of them thought the white boy was kind, not the black boy. Next slide. Same thing here with the girls and who's ugly and who's not. It showed you the percentage at the bottom, but still was the majority of them are picking the black girl as being ugly. Next slide. And then the boys, and then this is the one that kicked the dog, who kicks the dog. The slides, one of my daughters was upset because the slides are kind of crooked. Well, when I cut them to put them on the slide, I don't know why. I should have put white paper in the background. I did this in 2008. So, but they were presented straight, like the children could see them laid out straight. Next slide. And this had to do with gender, boys and girls, police officer. Next slide. This has to do with, I think, the happy girl, which girl is happy. Still, the majority picked the white girl as being happy. Next slide. And then this had to do with men, and that the men being bad, the majority, and it's not as much the majority, but they still favor the black guy as being the bad guy. And she changed it, put color in the clothes so they look more appealing, look nicer. Next slide. And then this was the women, and nice women who's nice, and they favored the white woman as being nice. Next slide. And this was, I think, the dishes, who washes the dishes. They still thought women. Next slide. And then healthy. I think this was more even, but still. Next slide. The idea was that the people looked pretty much the same other than the color of their skin and their hair. And who's sad. This one was kind of even. Next slide. And then clean, boys that are clean. Next slide. It was still a majority that said the white boy was clean. And then it's working at a gas station. Next slide. Although in the other slide, the boy's color, it looked almost like a gas station kind of, I could go with that. But, and then this was the only one that had a script that I had to read. And it said, the girls, they won't let others play. And I said, that she won't let others play, go away. You're not allowed to play, go away. And I was thinking to myself, like, what black girl's gonna say, you're not allowed to play, go away? It didn't matter. They still thought that the black girl was the one who would not let others play. Next slide. And then the men. Next slide. Women again. The white woman was wonderful. Next slide. And mind you, they're only seeing the pictures, and that's all, and getting out. So whatever they think really isn't about the photo, it's about their perception of black and white. And then this just goes through to tell you that they favored the white women and the white people for the nice things, like nice, healthy, clean, kind, happy, and they attributed the negative characteristics to the black people. Next slide. And so at the end of it, looking at everything, the broader question was, what do we do? Like, what are our next steps? And it is our next steps. And so one of the things is that we need to make sure that our children have access to books and toys and things where they are represented. And I went out, I purchased books, and I have some with me. Maya, I'm gonna have you just hold up some. There's the newest book that I have is by Lupita from the Marvel Black Panther. And so as soon as I saw this, it talks about dark skin, and if you can focus on that, it is ignoring it. Like if you ignore the elephant in the room, it doesn't go away. So it is just these books that focus on color. And the other thing has to do with hair. And you know, I have a big hair book, and I have the same one in a smaller version, like Love My Hair. I had a coworker once, and he was talking to me. There was a young boy who drowned. And he said, you know, Val, every time there's a drowning, it's always a black child. You guys just won't teach your kids how to swim. All right. I said, okay, first of all, I had to take swimming lessons. I went to a middle school in Hartford, and you could not pass 8th grade if you couldn't jump in the deep end and swim across the pool. So I know how to swim. Do I swim? No. You know why? Because my hair. At the time, I had chemicals in my hair to straighten it or relax it, the curls. I don't do chemicals now. I flat iron my hair like once every 2 weeks. But I was like, there is no way I'm gonna get in a pool with some chlorine, mess up my hair, because swimming caps are not made for black women. They do have some now, though, that are made for black hair. Mess up my hair, and not only do I mess it up, but then it falls out because the chlorine interacts with, and so I don't have any hair. But what I did do differently was when my youngest daughter came along, I never relaxed her hair. Her hair stayed natural. She took swimming lessons, and she was on a swim team. So it's not that we don't want our children to swim, it's that if my child is gonna get in a pool and they might drown, I need to be able to jump in there and save them. I'm not. I don't know how to swim. I took lessons, I passed the class, but I don't swim, and I don't know that I could if I had to. So it is not just about people not, and then the other thing is, where are they gonna go to a pool? Like where? At a community, and some communities don't have it, or they only have outdoor pools. So what do? They can only learn how to swim in the summer? So it is just this idea, like people say, well, black people don't. And the other thing, like, I was talking to a pediatrician, and she had said to me, one of my daughters had a urinary tract infection, and I took her to the office, and they wanted her to pee in the cup. And they put a little bag on her, and they told me to take her home. She was 2.5. I said, well, can she pee in the cup now? And she goes, well, do you want to stay here until? I said, Alicia, pee in the bag. And she peed in the bag. And she was like, she's only 2.5. And then somebody else said, yeah, you guys, meaning black people, you train your kids really early. Like, what's the rush? I was like, no, it's not that I was rushing. It was that, look, I'm not reading a book to say, don't start toilet training until 3. I'm like, the diapers are costing way too much. And childcare, if I want you to get in a better nursery school, you got to be out of diapers for me to pay less. So it has to do with more than, so I'm like, and I'm not waiting for a book to tell me that don't start toilet training them until they're 3. Stop it. If they are big enough to get a cup of milk out the refrigerator and look, get on the toilet. I don't have time for the foolishness. So it is just that attitude and understanding that culturally, when I can't afford childcare and I can't afford diapers, yes, I'm going to move them along. I don't need a book to tell me when to move them along. What I did need a book for was discipline, because I grew up and I was spanked. And I know my mother hates it when I say this, but my mother was a barber when I grew up. By the time I was in high school, she was a registered nurse, but she was a barber. And they have a leather strap that they sharpen the blades, right? That was what she used as a belt. And she would wait until you were butt naked, getting out the tub, and whatever you did that you couldn't even remember, that's what you got spanked with. And when I talked about this, the first time I talked about this, my mother was there, and somebody sitting next to her looked at her and said, apparently you didn't beat her enough because she's up there talking about it. But I read a book because I knew that I was better educated, and I knew that I did not want to hit my children, but I didn't know what else to do. So it's a book called Discipline Without Shouting or Spanking. And I was reading it, my older daughter comes up to me and she's looking at the book and she's like, you need a book to tell you how to discipline? I said, this book saved your life. So it is just the not knowing. And so just surrounding our children with books, and then redefine beauty, like what we call beauty, like this good hair and bad hair. There's no bad hair, that's just hair. Yeah, my hair is kinky and curly and I love it. What I don't love is like when it's straighter like this and I go outside and it's raining, I'm gonna have half kinky curly and half straight. And that does not work for me. And so, but it is teaching them to be good, to feel good about themselves. It's just like when you are overweight and you lose weight, people, oh my gosh, you look beautiful. So what does that mean when you didn't lose the weight that you like? So, and I do that too, and I have to stop. But it is like this idea of us making people feel a certain kind of way without even knowing what we're doing or what we're saying, just being aware of it. So letting our children know that they should feel good about who they are and the way they look and know. And I tell parents all the time, like, I used to say something to my oldest daughter. Now, mind you, I had my oldest daughter when I was 22. So everything I learned about parenting started with her. And by my own standards today, I was a young parent trying to do my best. And I would say to her, if you do that again, don't do that, I'll not take you out today, and by tomorrow I'll have another one just like you. And so I worked at a neonatal unit in a hospital when my children were younger, and there was a neonatologist, a doctor that I worked with who became a pediatrician. I took my children to him as their pediatrician, and he calls me one day. Took Alicia for an appointment, and then he calls me afterwards, and he says, I need to talk to you. I say, yeah. He goes, are you by yourself? This is before cell phones, so I'm on a house phone. Yeah. He goes, did you tell Alicia that you're gonna take her out, you brought her into this world, you'll take her out of this world, and 9 months later you can have another one just like her? Yeah, I did. And he said, well, she's scared to go to sleep at night. And he said, and did she tell you that she was scared to go to sleep? She did. I'm tucking her in bed, and she says, oh, I'm scared, I can't sleep. I said, why? She goes, I think you might kill me when I'm sleeping. I said, I'm not gonna kill you when you're sleeping. Look, if I were gonna kill you, you'd be wide awake because I want you to know it's me who's killing you. Okay. Like, how am I supposed to know that she's taking that literally, okay? Okay, I own that. That's my mistake, but I give him a lot of credit for calling me and saying, so I did, and I said, you know, Alicia, when I say that, I don't mean it. Like, my mother said stuff like that to me all the time. I just dismissed it. But okay, And then she goes, nope, nope, you're gonna kill me. I'm like, I am not gonna kill you. And so it was just rethinking that and some of the things that I said or did that I did not realize had the impact. So it's doing that. And then just teaching children how to embrace and be proud of who they are. I never went to a historically black college or university because when I went to college, neither one of my parents had gone to college. I didn't even know they existed. And none of my children did, although my youngest, Amaya, she got in. She didn't go because at the time, what we would have had to pay, what they were offering was ridiculous. And so we didn't go, and it was further away. But there is some value in the people that I know who've gone to historically black colleges and universities. It teaches them something about being proud of who they are and the way they look without feeling like, they have to justify anything. So I do love that. And then just do affirming language, like speak positivity into our children's lives, do things and talk about Black history. There's a book here, it's 28 Days of Black History. That is a wonderful book. It just talks about, Black people and their achievements, and that is what children need to know. So it's exposing them to that on a regular basis, teaching people how to love themselves, teaching people that, that there is value in who they are regardless. And then, so intentionally making sure that your children are socialized with people of color. And they don't have to think the way that you do, but they do need to be exposed to that, because when I went to nursing school, there were 2 Black people in my class. One, my best friend, she ended up missing a class, and so she graduated a year after me. So I was the only Black person who graduated in my class. So people need to know how to interact with other people, because sometimes you are the minority, and just because you are the minority does not mean that you have to feel like it, So it's just that exposure. And then be a mirror. When I worked in this office, when I worked for the state, a lot of people had cubicles. And they had mirrors sitting up. The mirror was so they could see if somebody was coming into their office. And, a mirror is supposed to be a reflection of yourself. If we start using mirrors to look at ourselves, we would do a much better job. I taught at a college once, and I had a class, I was teaching a psychology class, and there were 2 students, Black one and a white one. They had the same last name. But I remembered them so well because the Black student's name was Helen, and the white one was something like Shanice or Charisse, or it was something that I thought was a Black name, but she was a white student. I'm getting to the end of the semester. One of them is doing all A's, doing great, and the other one is like a C, getting ready to get to a D. And I look at my grade book, and I'm thinking like, well, it's the Black one that has got all A's, and the white one and now, don't even think about it. I'm like, oh, did I mix the 2 up? So at the end of the class, I say, Shanice, can I talk to you for a moment? And she comes up, and she's the white one. And I say, on your last test, and she's, I know, I got a D, but I'm gonna be ready. And in that moment, I was like, that was my mirror. What is it that made me second guess myself? Because the Black student was excelling and the white student was practically failing. And so I was like that was my moment. And so it is looking at ourselves and looking at the opportunities you have. And when you see somebody and, like you're thinking something negative about a child of color, don't say it. Say the opposite. Say, and be sincere. But say something positive to encourage somebody and build them up and make them feel better. And we should do it all the time with all children. Somebody sent me, and this is the last thing I'm gonna say, somebody just sent me a couple of days ago a Facebook video of the dance teacher. I don't know, some of you might have seen it, where they were performing, I guess at the end, I don't know if they won or what, but the teacher goes to hug the children in the dance class, and she's hugging the white girls, and there's a Black girl off to the side who's a part of this dance group. And she reaches to hug the teacher, and the teacher walks away. It happened in Connecticut at a dance school. I think it was in Plainville or Connecticut. And I'm thinking, and then so the mother saw it, and she said something to the teacher afterwards, and the teacher's like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. But it was another parent who recorded it and sent it afterwards to that mother to show her, look, she ignored your child. And so it hit the news. And so somebody that I know saw it, sent it to me, and then, you know. And so those are the things. And both children, it was that little black girl and she's a biracial. Her and her sister got kicked out of the dance class. And I'm like, recognize I made a mistake. Like, we have not gotten so far backwards that we think it's okay to do something like that and not. I would be ashamed of myself and so apologetic. But that's okay, because the color of money is still green. And when people withdraw from that program, it's going to say a lot more than words or shows. So that's it. Questions? Thank you all for being here, for listening, and I hope there is a takeaway that we have to do better. You know, race and color should not matter, but as long as it does, we have got to do better. So thank you. And the we is collective, me too. So thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Val?
Hello, my name is Cheryl. My daughter and her husband have a 2.5-year-old, and they're looking at preschools. The one that they might choose is further away, much more diverse, which they would like, a white child. But it's inconvenient, and there's after-school issues that they would have to take care of. And anyway, I'm thinking, okay, how can they expose their child to a diverse population? Not to make it convenient, but to actually do it, to make it happen. So I was checking in the town where eventually the child will go to school, and it's not very diverse. So do they move? How can they expose their child, who will turn 3 soon, to a diverse population? Where do they go? How do they make that happen?
So I would say, don't move, not unless they want to move, because kids are kids for so long. It's just exposing them, I would not be going out of my way to get to a diverse program, if it means that every day we're going to be inconvenienced and they're not going to have their peers nearby. But I would be intentional about other programs, reading programs, different places where children are, what is it, Chuck E. Cheese's? Oh my gosh, I can't deal with that. But places where they are going so that they are exposed, so that it doesn't seem odd or different. And there are many ways, churches, other organizations, and other programs where they would just be around other children. That can be intentional. And then inviting people over, because a lot of adults will say, I got a lot of black friends. Well, how many times have they been to your house? Why? Why not? And so it's just being intentional. And the same thing works for me, that I have white friends. I invite them over. I do things with them. I am very intentional.
So I talked to you at the very beginning, just a minute, that I'm a children's librarian in an elementary school. And I have Sully and a couple others, but one of the workshops I went to a few years ago pointed out the importance for me to order books that just show black children or children of color in everyday situations. Mm-hmm. Not that's just focusing on the black pride and beauty and things, which is important, but just every day. And I really focused on that. And when I put them out, like the kindergarten have a section where they have baskets and things they can go and take, just one time I had a whole bunch out, and I was like, wow, I have mostly black children book, with characters. And then I went, so what's wrong with that? For how many years it's been only white, and you put the token few black, and children of all races are taking them. So that's when you were talking about your grandchild, it's like maybe take them to the public library programs, where in a more diverse area. So.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I have tons of books in my home that have black people on the cover. I even went out and bought the traditional ones like Little Red Riding Hood, Goldilocks, with the black version. I didn't even know they existed until I went online and tried to look for them. So it is, and the bookstores, Barnes & Noble, they used to have a section with just black children's books, and years ago they changed it because they were trying to be inclusive. And I was like, yeah, but now when I'm looking for a book with the black person on the cover, I can't find it. I gotta go and look, by authors or know what I'm looking for. So it is a challenge, but it is definitely worth it. And you can find books that don't just focus on hair or other things, but it's intentional, and I have many of them here, and not just for children, even for adults. Mike, can you pick up the one about roots? I see a black dermatologist, yep, and she wrote a book, and she focuses on hair loss, and she does a lot of treatment for black women with hair loss. But I focus on this book because as a black woman, I went to other people for like hair loss, and and I found out I was allergic to something that was causing hair loss. But it wasn't until I went to her that I actually found out what I had and how to treat it. So when she put out her book, I absolutely bought it because that was what I needed. But there are a lot, and as adults, we should be reading more about history. And an all-inclusive history. And Michelle Obama's, I like this Go High. And just like, I have 4 daughters, and 2 of them were having a text message disagreement recently. And I was trying to close it, I'm like, let me end this. Okay, that's enough, stop it. And so then one of them, who shall remain nameless, she said, when you go low, I go lower. And I was like, I don't think that's what Michelle Obama meant. I think you're supposed to go. But it's just making these things as a normal part of life. Well, we shouldn't have to put effort in it, but we do.
This has been a topic that it's been really boiling inside of me lately. And I've been thinking about how is it I got to this boil point, no less. But some of it is I follow Black Table Talk on Facebook and been listening. And I like the candid, strip away all the nice stuff, because it's easy to listen to Michelle. It's not easy to hear some of the other stuff, but it doesn't mean it's not right. So some of my journey actually started with Audre Lorde and hearing her read her own works and meeting her as a person. And that for me was at 21. I didn't know even then how racist I was, because I grew up in a white town. Literally, there was one black boy in high school when I left. And God helping me wasn't going to be dating anybody because the hostility, and even the book that talked about, I'm going to lose the title again, of a blind woman meeting a black man and falling in love, and just the rage at that. But I thought I was open until I found out I wasn't. And then it became something I worked on and through the college years with Audre Lorde, and then I worked at a community action program. And where I'm going with it today is not so much about what I've learned as much. Sometimes the right answer is to shut up and listen. And then if you're a guest at the table, sometimes that's the best way to sit at the table until you learn something. And it was at the community action program where people were talking at me. And I tell you, the lessons didn't come with sugar. And it was a shut up sometimes and just take in, because my experiences weren't theirs. And I could not envision their experiences based on mine. What they went through to become the dynamic, powerful, get things done women that I saw was nothing like I had to live. And so in terms of how do I get my grandchild, or in my case, my children, is for me to be more diverse with who I spend my time with respect and regard for their power and their strength. They opened my eyes in lots of ways that I didn't like, but that I needed. And that discomfort sometimes still is with me because I'm not done learning. I'll be done learning when I forget how to listen, okay? When that becomes impaired, not my hearing, when my listening becomes impaired. So it is about who are we spending time with, who are we honoring and respecting. I have for a long time followed the people who talk about the amazing number of black people who've invented things that I take for granted that were hidden in history. And as a woman, I was aware of that, yes. With all the women, besides Marie Curie and Amelia Earhart, there really were women doing stuff out there that I was allowed as a role model. And what a difference that makes in my life, and what a difference it was to meet and see women of strength who were also gay. And there were people I wanted to be like when I grew up, rather than some of the people who were so flamboyant that truly that's not me. But it doesn't mean I can't learn from them now as an adult. But no, I didn't want to be like that when I grew up. But to know that there were plenty who I admire that were hidden from me. So again, how we expose ourselves is how we expose our children and we're to be grandchildren.
It is. So what you're basically saying is that you have learned to be the mirror that people see in you. And that is our challenge. That is what we are supposed to do. And we should be doing it our whole lives. And it's so interesting because when you have this eye-opening moment, it really changes you, because once you know, you can't go back to not knowing. It changes the things you do and what you say. And I still experience things that, that are racist. That blows my mind. I was looking got a new bedroom set, and I had gone to Raymore and Flanagan in Avon. And Amaya was with me. She just tends to be my sidekick. I think she thinks that I'm too old to be by myself, but anyhow, so we walk in the store, and there was a woman, a salesperson, a white woman, and she greeted the people before us and was talking to them. And so we walk in, and she looks and says hi and walks away. And I thought, whatever we find, I already knew, I'm not buying it here, I'm not buying it from her. And then we're in the store, and she comes over later and says, hi, if there's anything you need, let me know. And I didn't say anything. What I wanted to say was, why didn't you say that when I walked in the door? But I was so angry, and I'm always very conscious about not being the angry black woman. And so I left, and I ended up buying what I wanted from another store. But I just thought, like, gosh, this is 2025. And somebody had to say something to her, because for her to come back to us, somebody had to say, and I'm like, okay. And I wanted to say, money's green. The color of money is green. That's your goal, okay? If you get a commission, green. So it should not matter what I look like. But yeah, and I get it. Your thought was, because I'm a black woman, I can't afford to be there, or I'm not gonna buy anything. I don't know. But it still blows my mind. And I'm still very conscious, like when I go places, I used to try not to sit with the other black people. And I thought, like, why? Because if I'm in a room full of people and there are white people all together, am I thinking, like, why are all those white people together? No. So why should I think any differently? Just because there's only a few, I don't care. So it is. And my best friend is black, and we were the only two black people in our nursing school, and people kept trying to put us together. So that first year, we were like, I don't want to be her friend just because she's black. We ended up being friends because we were the two who had to have jobs as nurses' aides at the hospital, and everybody else was going home for the weekend, and we were there working. So it worked out, but not because people were pushing us together, but because we had so much more in common.
So one question, all the things that were shown in the study obviously then lead to the same kinds of things happening with adults. And you were talking about, medical care. We know about all the bias in medical care. And of course, you didn't find out what the story was with your hair till you saw it in this book, right? So doctors aren't educated about differences or paying attention to that, and then we see outright bias going on in our society. And now, more than ever, of course, we're being pushed to be colorblind, right? Where everybody's going to be blind, and let's ignore all of that. And of course, that's not going to help the problem. So, from your point of view, we're talking about with children, but what can we do to counteract all of that now with what's going on in our culture? That's a big question, but do you see like specific ways that we can sort of counteract the direction things are going in now.
Being more aware and getting involved. And when you see an injustice, call it what it is. Stop worrying about protecting other people or defending other people. You know, even in healthcare, there's so many disparities. I mean, when you look at pulse oximeters, I was at a Dr. King presentation by a CEO at a hospital a couple years ago, and he said the oximeters, the algorithm is set up so that if your pigment is darker, it reads like the oxygen level is higher than it really is. What? So that means I could be having difficulty breathing, and the oximeter says I'm breathing at 90-something%, but I'm really not. And that blows my mind, that's horrible. And when I was in my nurse practitioner programs, we had to go through this cultural awareness is what they call it. But when they got to black people, they were saying black people, they don't want to know about what's wrong with them. They don't want to know their medical illness. They don't want treatment. Like, what? That is not true. But if I'm a provider and I think, well, I got a black patient, they don't want to know, so I don't educate them. And shame on me. And it is changing that narrative and challenging it and then being intentional about what we do. And there may be a point when we are colorblind, but I'm not there. And for me to be colorblind would be to say I don't see myself. I don't know if that helps, Perry.
I'm not sure, but weren't there not studies, but medical experiments done with syphilis on black people? And, you know, I wasn't alive then. I read about it, but I'm thinking, how long does that memory collectively in the social network continue that maybe I go to a doctor, but he's white, and does he have my best interests at heart, or whatever? Just a thought. But that was something I read, and apparently it had a lasting impact. I don't know if it still has today.
It does. Tuskegee Airmen, and they were intentionally injected or infected with syphilis. And then when the study was over, they were not treated. And it wasn't until when President Obama was in office, then there was some restitution for the descendants who were remaining. But it's a look at Henrietta Lacks and how her cells were used for treatment. Her family was never compensated. So there is, and when we were in the pandemic, black people were very suspicious, like you don't trust the medical profession because you have legitimate reasons. They have lied to you. You have been mistreated in the past. You were treated unfairly just because of the color of your skin. So yes, those things are out there, and it has shaped the way that we view things. So as a healthcare provider, and I'm really focused on mental health, I educate people on the medications, on what they need to do. When you are educated, you can make a decision. I can tell you what is recommended, but at least now you have the knowledge and the information where you can make an informed decision.
Well, sometimes it seems we've come a long way, and sometimes it seems we haven't. And legislating DEI has been really important, that people that are giving out grants have to consider it, people that are accepting students into institutions, the training that goes on in every single office now has been a reflection of it being legislated, and now that's just being gutted. And we are left going, we had such a long way to go still. There's not a level playing field at all still. And part of it is because there is systemic racism. I mean, it's obvious that there is. But that aside, those are dirty words now, apparently, but so is DEI now. And I think maybe something that we can all do is bring that question up everywhere, to everybody running for office, to any institution that we are a part of or getting services provided by, to ask over and over, are you doing diversity training? Because it needs to be in the public eye still. I don't know what else to do, but to keep it really front and center as a part of the conversation. That we want it, we expect it, and we're just going to keep saying the words.
It is, you know, it is very difficult because what happened is that when people say DEI, they think black. That's the bottom line. And it is not about race. It is about leveling the playing field. It is about disabilities. It's about gender. It is about wherever there is a disparity, leveling it. And so when you take away the image that people think, you know, when we think, well, I was qualified for this job, but I didn't get it. Well, because it met, well, a DEI. Look, it happens, and it is affirmative action isn't about leveling, getting black people or people of color in positions. DEI is not about that. It is about leveling the playing field. And when my daughters went to magnet schools, when they were applying, they didn't need more black children. They needed more white children. And those are the ones who got in because there was a disparity. They had more children of color than they did white. That is how diversity and inclusion works and affirmative action. But what people have seen is they only see color. And they assume that DEI means black people getting something that is preventing somebody else from getting it. It is a lack of knowledge, I will say ignorance, and we have a lot of work to do. And we haven't come that far if in such a short time we can go backwards. It is just perceived progress, not actual progress.
And the same way that you showed, the study shows the same results. Here it is, 80 years later or 70 years later. It's the same thing with the studies related to employment or education or any of those things. In employment, they still do the same studies where they send applications, right, with white names and black names, and without them ever seeing the person, right, inevitably it's only the white-sounding names that get the interviews in all those studies over and over, even today. The issue with talking about the institutions and demanding diversity and cultural awareness and all of that is that it's not only being attacked in rhetoric, but of course we see all grants are being removed, right? Funding, support, literal attacks on institutions that continue to provide that kind of education. So now the institutions who want to do that are having to find workarounds where they can't say they're doing equity and inclusion. They have to give it secret names and do it in other ways that they can't say they're doing it. And if anybody finds out that they're doing it in that way even, right, there's repercussions. So the problem we have right now, of course, is, right, it's not only being shunned to do those things, but it's actively working against them.
Yeah, money. When they lose money, money is tied to almost everything.
Thank you so much. And I'm on the Diversity Equity Leadership team from New London Public Schools, and even before all this current legislation, a lot of our progress just got halted by just internal white fragility over just the really base level, basic stuff. So it's kind of like now it's like, okay, this on top of, now it's the calls coming from inside the house and out even more, but that's why I love organizations like More Than Words and Hearing Youth Voices, because in education, we should have viewed that obviously the student is our boss, is our top boss. They're the biggest stakeholder, and then followed by the grown-ups at home, then the Board of Ed and everything. So my question is I was wondering if you could tell me because I'm trying to find kind of different ways to communicate. If you had white teachers in middle school, what is something that you wish they knew, or that you wish, what do you wish they knew? And anyone else can answer this too, but no pressure.
In middle school.
Yeah, what would you say to your middle school? What do you wish they knew? If you could have told them something that you just wish they knew or would have best supported you, or...
I wish they knew how to treat all of their children equally and as though they believed they were all going to be successful. That children come to you with a disadvantage, and sometimes you see that disadvantage and it becomes like a scarlet letter. You treat them differently based on it, and when you should embrace them. Because when you look at people who are successful, whether they're athletes or lawyers or movie producers, they almost always come back and talk about a teacher who just had such influence on their lives. And it is that, and I get it. Being a black parent, most of my children, for most of their lives, they've all had white teachers. I've had interactions with white teachers that I thought like, you know, I met with a teacher who thought my daughter was cheating. She thought in a graphing calculus class that she was showing another student her answers on the graphing calculator. And I believed the teacher. So I called the teacher. I wanted to meet with her because my daughter's like, oh, no, Eddie, it's a mistake. I get there in high school, and it's a young white teacher. And first of all, when they call her to the office, she goes, oh, you showed up. So she didn't think I was coming because I was a black woman. And we sat down. We never got anywhere because she goes, your daughter's getting an A. Don't worry about it. I'm like, no, I want to know. No, it's fine. I took care of it. That meeting was over before it ever started. And I thought, like, and it's all teachers, because my same daughter, when she was in 3rd grade, she was not doing well in math. And her teacher was a black woman, and she was C. And we had a conference, and I'm like, well, she's only a C. Well, C is average. Like, that should be okay. And I said, but average children don't get recognized. And she said, no, but C is fine. I said, if you did not think my daughter was average, what would you tell me? She said, get a math tutor. We got a math tutor. She was never average again. But is this, and it doesn't matter what the race is of the teacher, it is their perception of children and where they're going to go in life. When our youngest daughter went to independent schools, but when we were looking around, we went to school, and they were talking and asking parents have any questions. I didn't have any questions, but when they started talking about their performing arts program, the guy looks at me and he says, me and my husband, do you have any questions? Yeah, why the heck are you looking at us now? But I said no, but I knew right then I'm not paying for somebody to make my daughter feel less than. I need somebody that's going to make her feel like she can do anything.
I love that so much, and may I share your message about expectations with the diversity, equity?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep, you're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and knowledge and your presence with us, because we really appreciate it.
Thank you. This is pure joy. So thank you for the joy.
All right. I think the first session with Rich is on May 6th, is it? Rich? May 6th, Tuesday. So hopefully we'll see you then.